Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Marie-Françoise Kosterwa. She's an expert of computer algebra, real algebraic geometry, professor at University of Rennes, and she will talk about. She will give an historic perspective on real algebraic geometry and computation.
Okay, so thank you Bernard. Yes, so I'm going to give basically a survey talk with historical aspects, but I'm also trying to connect with more recent results. But basically I'm giving no details on anything specific, it's more survey style. Okay, so of course, I'm not really following very closely the POEMA project, but I know it is dealing with polynomials, moments, sums of squares, extremal points, and real, so maybe extremal values rather than extremal points, but in my talk it will be more extremal points, and I want also to say a few words about real numbers. Okay, so these are the topics I want to follow. So it will start from some real root counting methods using, in fact, moments matrices. That's very familiar, I guess, in this community. Then quantifier elimination. Then I want to mention some non-effective problems in real algebraic geometry, which is to express positive polynomial as a sum of squares. And then we'll discuss some effectivity and complexity issues. The critical point methods and some applications, and then coming back to Hilbert's 17th problem, some elementary recursive solution, and finally a discussion about Coq and reals. So that's the topics I want to discuss a little bit today. Okay, so I'm starting with real root counting and generalizations. And of course, it's a very basic algorithmic problem. How many roots for a real polynomial? And by real here in this talk, we mean something a little more abstract than usual, maybe. So I mean with coefficients in a real closed field R. A real closed field R is a totally ordered field which has the intermediate value theorem that we call IVT, but only for polynomials. It means that if we have a polynomial which is changing values between A and B, there is a root C between the two, in the segment AB. And the property of this real closed field is that when we add I, which is the root of the polynomial x squared plus 1, we get a field which I call C, which is algebraically closed. So you can think of it as some algebraic situation which looks like the real numbers and the complex numbers. But it is, in fact, we are using other examples like the field of real algebraic numbers, which is also a real closed field, and also the field of some field involving infinitesimal values, like the field of Puiseux series with coefficients in a real closed field. And all of these are useful in this algorithmic context. So if we want to count the number of real roots of a polynomial, if we go back in history, there is the first one maybe was Descartes' law of sign, but it was not counting properly the number of real roots. It was just giving an upper bound on the number of real roots based on the sign changes on the coefficient of the polynomial. Then we have Sturm theorem, which is using the Euclidean division of P and its derivative. And the one I want to explain more today is the Hermite quadratic form. So it is using a signature of a quadratic form with entries, the Newton sums, which are some moments. So Hermite's result was a little after Sturm, but already in say the first half of the 19th century. Descartes is of course much before. Okay, so sorry. What I want to do is this. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so what is Hermite's quadratic form? So as I said, it's related to the moments. So I have a univariate polynomial, say monic, to make it simpler in what follows. And I'm looking at its, so its coefficients are in a real closed field R, but I look at the roots, of course, in the algebraic closure, C. And I look at the ith moment, which is the sum of mu of x, x to the I, where mu of x is the multiplicity of the roots x, as the root of p. And then I find this, so the p is the degree of the polynomial, and I make a p times p matrix, which is an Henkel matrix, so it means that the diagonal, anti-diagonal elements are the same, going from n0 to n to p minus 2. n0, for example, if I take here the I equals 0, I just get the degree, so this element is p, and then this is the sum of the roots, the sum of the squares of the roots, and so on. So this is the Hermite matrix. And the property of this Hermite matrix is that, well, there are two properties. The first one is that you can compute this coefficient, this ni, without having to know the roots, because of course you don't know the roots. So you are happy to have a way to compute the Newton sum without having a previous knowledge of the roots, just by using the coefficients of the polynomial. So that's very well-known Newton-Girard formula, which are giving you, so you can see it both ways. If you have the moments, you can compute the coefficients. If you have the coefficients, you can compute the moments using this formula. Okay, and then this proposition is telling you that you can compute the Hermite matrix from the coefficients without knowing the roots. And the second proposition is telling you that the signature of the Hermite quadratic form is just the number of real roots of p, counted without any multiplicity. And by the signature of the quadratic form, I mean when we decompose the quadratic form as a sum of linear squares, and difference of linear squares is the difference between the number of plus and the number of minus in this decomposition. And how do we prove it? In fact, it's not very complicated. It's just using the fact that complex conjugate roots contribute for a difference of two squares in the decomposition of the quadratic form. So finally, it means that only the real roots are counting. And maybe I should note here that this Hermite matrix is in fact very useful also because its determinant is just the discriminant of p. Okay, so a little generalization. Generalization is the notion of Tarski query. So what's the Tarski query? The Tarski query is just the sum for all the real roots now of p of the sign of q of x, where q is another polynomial. So in fact, if you think the sign of q of x is 0 when q of x is 0, is 1 when q of x is strictly positive, and is -1 when q of x is strictly negative. So finally, this Tarski query is just the difference between the number of real roots of p where q is positive and the number of real roots of p where q is negative. And if I take q equals 1, of course, as a special case, I just get the number of real roots. But it's useful to deal with more general q when you do real algebraic geometry. And in fact, this Tarski query will appear as the signature of a generalized Hermite. And generalized Hermite is going to be a quadratic form with linear entries, which are linear combinations of the Newton sums. So I'm defining it now. So now I look at the ni of pq, which is generalizing the ni of p I had before when q was equal to 1. And it's just defined as the sum over the complex roots of p of mu of x, q of x, x to the I. And of course, if I decompose q of x in the sum of monomials, you see that it's Newton sums which are going to appear. Again, mu is the multiplicity of x. And the generalized Hermite matrix of PQ of index ig is just n I plus g minus 2 of PQ, defined as here. So it's a generalization of what we had before when Q was equal to 1. And I call the Hermite of PQ the associated quadratic form again. And then entries are linear combinations of moments using the coefficients of Q. So again, it's easy to compute because we know the Newton sums by Newton-Girard formulas, and then we can make linear combinations and compute the Hermite matrix. And the proposition is that the signature of the Hermite, generalized Hermite quadratic form is in fact the Tarski query of PQ, so it is generalizing the result we had before in the special case when Q was equal to 1, and the proof is in fact very similar. When I have complex conjugate roots, they contribute for a difference of 2 squares in the signature. Okay, so that's the real root counting and generalization using quadratic form, using Hermite. And what's interesting for computation here is that the signature is determined by the signs of the principal minors of the matrix. In general, it's not the case that the signature of the quadratic form is determined by the signs of the principal minors, but as we have seen, Hermite matrix has a special structure. It's a Henkel matrix, and we can prove this in this particular case. And what's important for us also, that it can be computed in quasi-linear time. So if I take an estimate on the degree P, it will be O tilde of D. And the bit size is also controlled. But of course, you don't see it when you just look at the Hermite matrix. You need to use subresultants and remainders rather than minors in order to do the computation, but in any case it can be proved, and it has been studied in details. Okay, now we go to sign determination. So in fact, the sign determination is dealing with how many, if I given the list of polynomials, I want to know what are the possible sign conditions realized by the zeros of P for this polynomial. So the first example, just if I'm given one polynomial, I can compute these 3 Tarski queries, the Tarski query of P with 1, the Tarski query of P with Q, and the Tarski query of P with Q square. And from these 3 Tarski queries, from these 3 numbers that I can compute through the signature of these Hermite quadratic forms, we can easily compute now 3 quantities, which are the number of roots of P where Q is positive, the number of roots of P where Q is negative, and the number of roots of P where Q equals 0. And this gives in particular the list of signs of Q realized at the root of P. Because if this quantity is 0, for example, it just means that the number of roots of P where Q is positive is empty. So finally, we get this list of realizable sign conditions. So this is for one polynomial, but we want to do it for a general, we want to do it for a list of several polynomials, say S polynomials. So we can do a lot of Tarski queries of all possible products of the Q and Qi square. This will give us 3 to the S quantities. And from the 3 to the S quantities, we can compute the list of realizable sign conditions, because there are also 3 to the S possible sign conditions on this list. But of course, much less of them are realizable, because the number of realizable sign conditions is necessarily smaller than the degree of the polynomial. And using in a clever way this fact, we get sign determination that can be improved using Tarski query, again, of Qi and Qi squares, of some products of the Qi and the Qi square, but not all of them, only a few of them. Okay, so it's quite strange to give a talk without seeing any, hearing any reaction. So I would like to know if there are any questions, and if Bernard, you're still here listening to me, or is it okay?
Yes, yes.
No.
You are followed by people, yes.
So I'm not speaking in the desert. I mean, some people are listening to me. Okay. Okay. Other questions at that point, or because at the end of my first talk, of my first part. I mean. Okay. No, no problem. It's okay, Bernard.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
please.
okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so now we go to quantifier elimination. So quantifier elimination, of course, it's a very important problem in real algebraic geometry, and I'm always taking this very basic example to explain it because it's a generalization of high school mathematics you all know about, which is the fact that the existence of a real root for a polynomial of degree 2, by this I mean a polynomial which is really of degree 2, so a is not 0, is given by checking this the sign of the discriminant, which is in this special case b squared minus 4ac. But of course, as I told you, there is a general notion of discriminant for a polynomial of degree p, and it was given as the determinant of this Hermite matrix. Okay, so what does it mean that we have this? Well, normally, to check whether there is a root, we could naively think that we have to check any number, any real number. That would be very long because there is an infinite set of real numbers. So in fact, we replace something which is potentially infinite with the existence of such an x by something which is totally finite, which is just checking that b squared minus 4ac is non-negative. And we can see also that the existence, since it's a sign condition which is dealing only with the coefficient of the polynomial, the existence of the root will be the same over the real, over any closed field, real closed field containing the reals. So we have this kind of completeness result. And in fact, the fact that and why do we call it quantifier elimination? Because here we have an existential quantifier, and here we don't have quantifier at all. The variable x has been disappearing. So quantified variable, which appears in this formula here, disappears in the after we made the quantifier elimination. So in fact, the fact that it's true for polynomial of degree 2, all of us know, but it was proved by any formula by Tarski in the beginning of the 20th century, in 1930 or something like that, 1930. And it was done by Tarski by eliminating one variable after the other. And when we now kind of reread the Tarski paper, modernize it a little bit, we see that what he was doing was really parametric sign determination. So I told you we can do sign determination by using computations of Tarski queries. But if you have now a parameter, so if we do it for ABC real numbers, we are going to find an answer which is going to be just the list of the non-empty sign conditions. If we now ABC are parameters, we are going to have discussions according to the parameters, because when we look at the Hermite matrix, now the coefficients are polynomials in the parameters. And we can compute the minors of this Hermite matrix. It will give polynomials depending only on the parameters. And these are the polynomials that we are going to use to decide whether there is a real root or not. So we can compute the same condition on the parameters, which are fixing the realizable sign conditions, on a list of parametric polynomials, the roots of the parametric polynomials, using Tarski queries of all products of the Qi and the Qi square. And this is giving a polynomial, so all the minors of all the generalized Hermite matrices for all products of the Qi and Qi square, which are now depending only on the parameters and not on the main variable, and same conditions on these are going to determine finally all the Tarski queries and then all the non-empty sign conditions. Okay, so it's not a method which has a very good complexity, but it is some effective algorithm which is solving quantifier elimination. So we can say that quantifier elimination, even when it started in Tarski's time, was already an algorithmic method. Okay. So now I want to talk about another very important problem in the history of real algebraic geometry, which is the Hilbert 17 problem. And you see that in this case, even though there is a connection between some aspects of quantifier elimination and this problem, the proof that was given was highly non-constructive. So I want to explain that now. Okay. So the problem is about positivity and sums of squares. So the problem is the following. If we have a polynomial with real coefficients, which is taking only non-negative values, can we express it as a sum of squares? So first question, which is natural, is the sum of squares of polynomials. And indeed, in some cases, it is working, because, for example, if the number of variables is 1, well, if we decompose the polynomial in powers of irreducible factors, if the polynomial is everywhere non-negative, it means that we have degree 1 factors, but with even multiplicities. And then we have also degree 2 factors, which correspond to complex conjugate roots. And this degree 2 factor is clearly a sum of squares. And then we have decomposed every factor as either it is a square directly or it is a sum of 2 squares. And then multiplying sums of squares, you get a sum of squares. So it is easy for the case of a polynomial in 1 variable. And if the degree is 2, and we have many variables, again, it means it's a quadratic polynomial, and the quadratic polynomial, if it takes only non-negative values, we can decompose it as a sum of squares of linear polynomials. So again, it is true. But basically, it is only the 2 cases where this is true. Well, there is one extra case that I'm not really discussing in details, which is a little more complicated. When the number of variables is 2 and the degree is 4, it's also the case that a non-negative polynomial is always a sum of squares of polynomials. But in general, we have explicit counterexamples. It was known in Hilbert's time already that it was not possible to express any non-negative polynomial as a sum of square of polynomial, but there were no explicit counterexamples. And there is in fact a very simple one, which is due to Motzkin. And you see this is a polynomial of degree 6 in 2 variables, so it's the next case here, and this is not a sum of squares. So how can we see that it's not a sum of squares? Well, first we need to see that it is non-negative. Everywhere non-negative. Why is it everywhere non-negative? Because when we compare, if we divide by 3 here, you see that this is, if we divide by 3, we see just the arithmetic mean of these 3 quantities. But what is the geometric mean? The geometric mean, you need to multiply all these 3 things and take the square root, and you get the cubic root, and you get x squared y squared. Okay. Since the arithmetic mean is always at least equal to the geometric mean, it means that this polynomial takes only non-negative values. And then we need to prove that it's not a sum of squares. And basically what you are going to do is to try to write it as a sum of squares of polynomials of degree 3, because if it's a polynomial of degree 6, it has to be the sum of squares of polynomial of degree 3, and you see that it's not possible. For example, if there was a monomial of degree x3 appearing in the sum of squares, then we should have some x to the 6 in these monomials, and there is no x to the 6. So x3 cannot appear, and then you see from by this very elementary kind of argument that in fact M is not a sum of squares. Okay, so what is Hilbert 17 problem then? So it's a reformulation that was apparently proposed by Minkowski, and it is in the list of problems of Hilbert in his famous list in the Congress of Mathematicians in Paris, and under the 17th list in the list, and it was reformulated in a very clever way. They're wondering now if a non-negative polynomial is a sum of squares, but not necessarily of polynomials, but of rational functions when you now accept denominators. And 27 after the question by Hilbert, it was solved by Artin And what is very striking that he gave an affirmative answer. It is indeed the case that a non-negative polynomial is a sum of squares of rational functions, but his proof is non-constructive. And I'm going to explain it now. Okay. Okay. So it's a proof by contradiction. We suppose that P is not a sum of squares of rational function, and we are going to prove that there is a value of P. I mean, P is taking a strictly negative value at a given point. Okay, so it goes like that. We look at the sum of squares. They form a proper cone of the field of rational functions and do not contain P. So by a cone, I mean something which contains squares, is closed under addition and multiplication, and the proper cone is a cone which does not contain -1. Okay, so using Zorn's lemma, we can get a maximal proper cone of the field of rational functions which does not contain P, and such a maximal cone defines the total order on the field of rational functions. So finally, the situation is as follows. We have found, starting from the fact that P was not a sum of squares, we have found a total order on the field of rational functions which does not contain P. Now, this total order on the field of rational functions which does not contain P makes, of course, of rational functions a totally ordered field, and we can define its real closure. So as I told you, a real closed field, I just repeat the definition I gave you at the beginning. So the intermediate value theorem for polynomials holds. And we can prove that every totally ordered field has a real closure. And then taking the real closure of the field of rational functions, we get a field in which P takes negative values. We just evaluate P at the generic point, which is the point x1, xk. And then, after we've been evaluating, so we've been finding a negative value in an extension of the base field, but we've seen that if P is taking negative value, we are going to see that if P is taking negative value of an extension, it's going to be to take a negative value over the base field. In fact, it's the first instance of transfer principle in real algebraic geometry, and it's bringing us back to quantifier elimination I was telling you about before. Okay, so let's see that. The transfer principle is telling us that a statement which is involving elements of R and which is true in a real closed field containing R, for example, the real closure of the field of rational functions for a totally chosen for a chosen total order is going to be true in R. But of course, it's not, what do I mean by statement? It cannot be any statement, only a first order logical statement, like, for example, this one, the existence of a value for which P is strictly negative. So if this is true in a real closed field containing R, it's going to be true in R. And as I told you before, it's a special case of quantifier elimination, because when we eliminate quantifiers in this formula here, we are going to find sign conditions on some expression in the coefficients of P. And if this is true, if this statement is true over an extension, it's going to be true over the base field, because it's only sign conditions on the coefficients of the polynomial. So it's interesting that, of course, in fact, Artin was proving directly this transfer principle. It's called Artin-Lang homomorphism result without knowing quantifier elimination. And quantifier elimination was proved a little later by Tarski, but finally it is very related. So so in fact, we can say that Artin proved a special case of quantifier elimination that he was using for his transfer principle, and then later on, Tarski proved in general quantifier elimination. But of course, nowadays we just see it as a special case of a more, general results. Okay. Okay, so now I want so this is the non-constructive historical proof, and we are going to see later, if I have time to reach this point in my talk, that now we can in fact have some constructive solution for Hilbert 17 problem, but it's using several results that I need to tell you about. Okay. So, Bernard, everybody is still there, and are there questions on this part of my talk?
Yes, please ask question. I don't see.
No questions? Okay, no questions. Okay, so let's move to the part about effectivity and complexity. So now we want to think about what the situation with computations in this for this problem. So for the real root counting and Tarski query using Hermite, we have seen that yes, indeed it's working because we have a way to compute the Newton sum from the coefficients. Then we have a way to compute the signature of the quadratic form by checking the signs of the principal minors. And then again, for sign determinations, since it's based on Tarski queries and Tarski queries can be computed by Hermite, yes, it is working. Okay, quantifier elimination, we have seen also that it's an algorithm even from the start. In fact, Tarski's paper was supported by the RAND Corporation, same as RAND Xerox, because they were interested in effective methods. So his parametric sign determination was also working. It was producing a quantifier-free formula. And for Hilbert 17 problem, we've seen that the answer is no, because the method of Artin's proof was non-constructive. So let's explain that a little better. First, given a polynomial, we want to express it as a sum of squares. The first thing to do is to check if it is really everywhere non-negative. And this can be checked by quantifier elimination. But if we want to provide a representation as a sum of squares of rational functions, we don't get it, because as Artin himself noted that his proof is very indirect, but that effectivity is desirable but difficult. So Artin was in fact always thinking all his life, we are doing of course a lot of other mathematics, but he was always thinking of this problem of effectivity, and even mentioned it to Kreisel, as we are going to discuss a little later. So why is Artin's proof not effective? Maybe we can see it here. So you see, first it's going by contradiction, but the more important is that we need to use Zorn's lemma, which is absolutely non-effective. So it's really a very fascinating topic, because it is okay. Yes, because it's a very natural problem given the non-negative polynomial, how to compute to express it as a sum of squares, but right now we don't know how to do it. Okay, one thing I would like to note that in any case we always need the ordered base field to be discrete. So discrete, by this I mean that it's always possible to design the sign of an element. So finally, if we are dealing with the real numbers, it's not the case that we can determine the sign of any number given by a Cauchy sequence, because maybe this Cauchy sequence is producing many 0 digits, but at the end we don't know if the number is going to be 0 or strictly positive or strictly negative. So all these quantifier elimination and all these effective procedures that we've been talking about are valid only in a field where the ordered base field is discrete. Okay, and now of course the second thing we'd like to know is some complexity bounds. And from what I told you already, we have real root counting and Tarski queries which are not bad. In fact, they are quasi-linear in the degree and also with good degree bounds in terms of the of the bit size of the coefficients, and also sign determination. If we do it in a clever way, we get something which is polynomial in D and S. But if we do Tarski quantifier elimination, it was at that time only primitive recursive. Okay, so now I want to introduce one new information about the characterization of real algebraic numbers. So, in fact, real algebraic numbers can be characterized by some conditions on their derivatives. So, in fact, the real root of a polynomial is characterized by the same conditions which are taken by the derivatives at the root. That's what we call Thom encoding. And how can we compute the Thom encoding? Well, since Thom encoding is given by a sign condition, we just use sign determination to compute the Thom encoding, taking for the polynomials the derivative of the polynomial. So this is not at all difficult to prove. You can just prove it by induction on the degree of the polynomial. You prove it for the derivatives of the polynomial. For p prime, we suppose that for p prime, the roots of p prime are characterized by the sign taken by the other derivatives, and then we prove it that it's also true for p. So this is not complicated to prove. Okay, so if we want to go beyond the classical quantifier elimination method, if we want to go to non-primitive recursive quantifier elimination method, the first one is called Collins cylindrical algebraic decomposition, and it's doubly exponential in the number of variables, but nevertheless polynomial in the degree and the number of polynomials. And one important thing that Collins was doing was to use something called subresultants to control the degree growth and combinatorial explosion. But of course, nevertheless, doubly exponential is quite big, and even this is a very nice method. Computations are not very practical in more than 2 variables. What's interesting to note also that the proof of Collins is using the continuity of the roots and the notion of connected components. So it's not an algebraic proof. You really need to know some geometry of the roots in order to be able to prove that Collins' method is correct. And in fact, together with Daniel Perucci, we made a recent variant of this CAD, which is using Thom encoding and sign determination with a purely algebraic proof. Okay. So so maybe Bernard, maybe you should tell me how much time I have, because I know I started slightly late, but
yes, like 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. 10 minutes. Okay. Then maybe I'll go directly, maybe I'll come back to that, but then maybe I'll go directly to this section, which was to tell you something about the elementary recursive solution to Hilbert 17 problem, and then I'll come back to critical point method applications. So we want to make effective this Hilbert 17 problem. As I told you, Artin was wanting to do it, but was not able to. And in fact, he mentioned the problem to Kreisel. So Kreisel was a specialist in proof theory, and Kreisel was very excited about the problem, and his school was able to prove primitive recursive degree bounds. So what, like for example, you see we can have a scheme which is defined, the first function will be 2 to the n, the second will be 2 to the 2 to the n, and the value of n for the n function will be 2 to the 2 to the 2 to the 2 to the, with no limitation on the level of exponentiations that you have. And what is meant by elementary recursive degree bounds, that we accept only the functions which have a fixed level of exponentials, like single exponential, 1 level of exponential, doubly exponential, 2 levels of exponentials, and maybe 5 levels of exponentials, but the number of exponentials has to be fixed. Okay, so in fact, we already say in Kreisel time, which is say in the mid 1950, there was some effective solution for Hilbert 17 problem, but with primitive recursive degree bounds. And so in fact, so that's what, so in fact, it appears in a paper by Kreisel in 57. It's not really totally convincing, but there is a student of Kreisel named Dakin, and it was again reworked by Henri Lombardi and Schmidt, a student from Becker. But all the proofs they did, very clever ones, were always primitive recursive degree bounds on the number of variables. And we've been working on this problem with Daniel Perucci and Henri Lombardi. And in 2014, we found another constructed proof, which is elementary recursive degree bounds. And as I told you, it is a tower of 5 exponentials, 2 to the 2 to the 2 to the d to the 4 to the k. And it took a long time to be published, but finally the paper was published this year as a memoir of the EMS. So, of course, I cannot at all explain the proof, but I just want to say that we needed to construct specific algebraic identities to express these classical results in algebra, which is the fact that real polynomial of odd degree has a real root, which is of course for us just an axiom, a consequence of AVT, but this axiom has to be translated into algebraic identities. A real polynomial has a complex root. We need to use an algebraic proof, which is Laplace proof. Tarskill queries can be computed by Hermite quadratic forms. The Sylvester inertial law for quadratic forms is valid, which means that we can express the signature in two different ways, then the two values are equal. All the work about the realizable sign conditions for a family of polynomials by looking at signs of Hermite quadratic forms, and the realizable sign conditions fixed by a list of non-empty sign conditions for an efficient projection using only algebra. And this is what I was telling you about the work I was doing with Daniel on some elementary quantifier elimination, which is not using geometric arguments in order to be proved. And after we do that, it's a very long paper, like 120 pages, we are able to produce a sum of squares with elementary recursive complexity, and it turns out that it is the tower of 5 exponentials. And at that point, we cannot do better. We have little hope for a method which would be using only a tower of 4 exponentials, but it's still not clarified entirely. Okay, so in the last minutes, I want to mention. So where am I? Sorry, not here. Sorry. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I want to mention another topic in the last minutes. So it's something which is much more recent. I mean, it's something that started about 30 years ago, and which is the critical point method with several of its applications. Okay. So we've seen that the problem we have with quantifier elimination, that we were eliminating one variable after the other, and this was creating, in the best case, double exponential complexity. But there is a method which has been initiated by Grigoriev and Vorobyov, which I call here the critical point method, which is the idea to project block of variables in one step. For example, imagine this is a very high dimensional smooth algebraic set, and we can look at its extremal points in the x1 direction, say the x direction, and we get these points. And you see that in order to get these points, we don't need to project the set on Rk-1, Rk-2, and so on. We just get these points by solving a polynomial system of equations in the space. And if we think of it, how do we get it? It is just p equals 0, and then all these partial derivatives except the one in the x1 direction, which have to be equal to 0 because we want the gradient to be pointing in the x direction. So we need that the other derivatives are 0, and this is just a polynomial system in k variables given by k equations of degree at most k. So using Bezout theorem, we get something which is single exponential. So then we need to be able, using, for example, the rational univariate representation, to be able to express this finite number of points as the value of a rational function. And then we can use the Thom encoding and so on. So finally, we have the fact that we've been touching the hypersurface in a finite single exponential number of points. But of course, this is only for something which is smooth. So if we want to do something in a non-smooth case, in a deterministic way, then we need to introduce a fixed number of infinitesimals to treat the singular cases. And then they become rather impractical, except in some generic situation, even though an infinitesimal should not be considered as an extra variable in the computations, because it is an extra variable with the property that it is something small. So there are many applications of this method. So quantifier elimination method, which was already known by Grigoriev and Vorobyov, but then it was improved. The existential theory of the reals, which is to decide just the existence, for example, of a point for which p is negative, as we needed for Hilbert 17 problem, which is single exponential, because we have only one block of existential quantifiers, and we can project it in one step. Sampling, which is finding a point at least in every semi-algebraically connected component. A roadmap algorithm, which is including baby step, giant step work with like my work with Shaugata and Moab and Eric. Also, some more recent divide and conquer roadmaps, like we can find in a paper by Schultz or by a more general result in my paper with Shaugata. So I think the discrepancy is coming from two directions. So one is that for us, in order to prove something, it has to be very algebraic because we need to translate it into algebraic identities. So any geometry, I mean, any proof coming from geometry, we cannot use. And even those coming from algebra, it's a lot of work in order to be able to use them. But then, on the side of the methods we mentioned, they are purely numerical, but if we want to transfer them from numerical to some exact computation in the sense of computer algebra, we are going to reintroduce also exponential degrees. That's what I can say.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, and thanks for your patience, and really sorry for the technical problems. Okay, so see you soon.